The worst thing is if I tried to sing. That would completely empty the hall.
He says we're, yeah, that's right.
Oh,
So go for it.
okay.
You're on, they're hot.
Okay, good evening and welcome to the August 20th meeting of the Morro Bay Planning Commission. We're at the Veterans Memorial Building at 209 Surf Street, so if you have nothing better to do, come on down and join us. We're missing one of our commissioners, Jesse, tonight, but we have a quorum, so I'll call the meeting to order. Could we please have a moment of silence here? Thank you very much. Next, please stand, face the flag, and we'll begin the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do we have any commissioners that would like to make some announcements?
Michael's chair is broken.
Besides, my chair needs some repair.
Should we call OSHA? Or?
I was going to say, Scott and I both attended the California Climate Conference at Cal Poly last week on 2 days, and it was the kind of thing that you're looking way down the line, big picture items, as well as some people in the weeds on some issues that face the towns. And I was kind of shocked, in a way, at how fast the electrification of California is going to occur. And if I was going to be building a new house, which I may be, I would be saying goodbye to gas. And it wouldn't surprise me if that's not the agenda at the higher levels coming down to us in the long term. And it's very interesting to see how they're preparing for that, how people think it's going to change. It's going to change the major way to achieve our climate carbon neutral goals and air quality. And aside from that, it was just wonderful to see a bunch of people who like wonkish issues about planning. And I was there as a faculty member, but you were representing the city. Maybe you'll talk about that later on.
Would you like to take a minute now to do it while we're on the subject?
No, I mean, I think, mirroring Commissioner Lucas's comments, I mean, it was interesting to go. I've been to, this is the fourth one that they've had, and I've been to one other one. It was the one, not the last one, but the one prior to that. So the second one that they initially had, and they had one of the most interesting sessions they had was on the electrification, of California and where we might be going. And I agree with Commissioner Lucas. I think you might see the next version of the building code come through, with that as requirements, if not sooner than that, because the goal by the state, to reduce carbon output to 80% of 1999 levels is coming quickly, and so one of the ways you do that is to push it out through building codes, and so I could see that being, how that happens moving forward, and it could even come out, as a change to the building code during the next cycle that we're going to start here, 2019. Building code goes into play on January 1, 2020. So it might actually come down the pike sooner than that. A lot of the other sessions, dealt with, climate change and where we're going with it. And kind of give you some practical examples of what other jurisdictions are doing out there related to climate change. The city, as you're all aware, because you've been involved with it, has climate change and climate adaptation built into our draft general plan and the coastal program. It's one of the reasons I was attending the conference was to see, since we started that effort 4 years ago, have we had dramatic changes in direction related to some of the things that we were looking at. I mean, do we need to update it? Because it's taken a while to get through that process. Thankfully, didn't find anything that was really changing the direction that we were going, but that was one of the reasons for my attendance, was to make sure that we were still on point and still going in the right direction. I don't know that I have a lot to add beyond that. It was worthwhile. I enjoyed most of the sessions that I went to. They had varying sessions on how one of them was even on public outreach and as it relates to climate change, and how do you introduce that to the public? Because in many circumstances, most folks aren't aware that there are these goals and parameters that have been adopted by the state that are being pushed down through cities, and we're probably going to have a much more aggressive climate action plan when we update our climate action plan. We're at the end of it right now. We need to start that process. It's just we need to get done with the GPLCP and zoning code first, and then move on to that. So that'll be coming down the pike as well.
And where did they think the electrification of the transportation sector was as far as plans, and where are we in implementation?
Yeah, there's whole sectors out there that are looking at how we're achieving that. I mean, they touched on everything. They talked about how do you, if you address the electric transportation, they also looked at existing buildings, because once you address vehicles and you're addressing new buildings, then one of the biggest problems we're going to have are the existing buildings that are out there and how you retrofit those. And are we going to, and some of the side conversations that I had while I was there was, are there going to be parameters or requirements pushed down through the state through assembly bills and things like that require retrofits of buildings? Because that's the conversation that's having at the state level. That's how they're looking, at least the conversations right now. That's how they're looking at getting at those buildings. Because that's what we have the most of, existing buildings out there, right? And that's where you get a lot of bang for your buck that way, and you have a lot of buildings out there that are fairly dirty as it relates to the technology for power that they're using and those types of things. So I would imagine this is the conversation is going to be this is a start to it, and it's going to build from here. And again, the legislature is looking at it now. So, as we go through the next couple of legislative sessions, I would imagine you're going to start seeing more and more come out of them as it relates to greenhouse gas emissions and going through electrification process and those types of things.
Exciting times. Okay, thank you. Thanks for that. Okay, now is the time we set aside for public comment. This is, typically if you cannot stay for a meeting for anything on the agenda or items not on the agenda, this is the time we come forward. Or if you wish to speak to an item that's on the consent calendar, now would be the time. So please come forward. Okay. Seeing none, we'll close that. And then we have no presentations. So the next item is the consent calendar. Does anybody wish to pull any items from the consent calendar? Okay. Do we have any discussion or a motion?
I move we accept the calendar.
I'll second.
Any discussions? Nope. Okay. All in favor? Aye. Say aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Okay, moving on, we're at item number B1. This is case number CDP 19-018, and the site location is 3009 Beachcomber Drive, of course, in Morro Bay. Are we ready with the staff report?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
This site is located on Beachcomber Drive with frontage along the coastal dunes. The site is 8,100 square feet. There's a coastal access alley on the south side of the property, and the home was built in or about 1971. The environmental investigation involved Sage Institute reviewing the site and determining the ESH limits and the 50-foot buffer. And this indicates that the property line of the house is still 15 feet away from the ESH buffer area. And the proposed additions are not on that portion of the house, so it has no effect on the ESH work area. The historic building assessment. This home was designed by James Mall, who's a noted local architect, and it was designed as his own residence. It's not on any historic registry. The proposed project is preserving the character of the original home. The summary of the proposed additions, there's 4 small additions. Number one, and I've indicated on the map if you can see them. Number one on the top left is an extension of a side wall. It's about 7 lineal feet. Number two is a slight extension of the entryway, about 30 square feet. Number three, in the center at the bottom, is a new master bathroom of approximately 138 square feet. And four is an enclosed breezeway between the existing garage and the existing home to create a guest suite. This is a summary of the upgrades. The home is 1971, and it's in saltwater air, so it's had some deterioration. They are going to do an exterior siding replacement, windows and door replacements, new roof, solar panels on the garage. And these images give you an idea of the type of finishes that they're considering that are all acceptable and similar to the original construction and intent of the house. In the east side, you can see the entryway in the background. This is a new outdoor fireplace, new louvered patio cover, and modifications to the front fencing, which is not in the photograph. Site zoning and overlay areas. This is an R1 S2A zoning district, and they are meeting or exceeding all of the standards for setback and height. The new additions are all at or below 10 feet 6 inches, and the existing home has a height up to 17 feet to accommodate the pitched roof. Character of the neighborhood. Many homes are either new or have had significant upgrades, resulting in a blend of modern homes and mid-1970s homes. The subject property is considered Sea Ranch style. Staff recommends approval for the Coastal Development Permit CDP 19-008, 19-018. And that is my final decision. It's 19-018, pursuant to the findings and conditions of approval included in Planning Commission Resolution 19-19.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Do we have any ex parte communication?
I do. I communicated with the owner, Joanne, and with Kathy Novak on site.
Okay, great. Questions for staff? Joseph, do you have anything? Okay, Michael, Susan? Nancy, can you extrapolate and explain what the coastal access is there and what is it dedicated? Who's supposed to maintain it? And why is there fencing across it? And things like that.
Okay, so I think some of it is a bit of a mystery. I think it originally was a mid-block access from Beachcomber to Driftwood, which Driftwood does not exist on the west side and won't exist. And so it's never been perfected. I think it is an easement, and it's unfinished and it's unmaintained, and you can't use it because it leads you right into a fenced area to protect the snowy plover.
Okay.
It was identified and dedicated on the subdivision map for that area. So that's where it comes from. There's a similar one out on Driftwood too that takes you out through Driftwood out to the beach if there were actually a tract out there, or actually out, lots out there that were built on.
Through the ice plant. Okay. Okay. So at this point, we'll open it up for public comment and have the applicant please come forward and state your name.
Good evening, Chair, Lou, and Commissioners. My name is Kathy Novak, and I'm here tonight representing the applicants for the 3009 Beachcomber Drive project. Before I begin, I'd like to thank staff for their time and assistance with this project and also their recommendation for approval. I'll be brief with my comments tonight, as you've been presented with a significant amount of details through the staff report, the presentation, and the project materials provided by the applicant. Staff has summed up the project description nicely by stating that the applicants would like to update and modernize the home to be more functional and sustainable, but also recognize that James Mall design structures have a historic significance in Morro Bay and would like to preserve as much of the exterior design features and characters as possible. As noted in your staff report, the proposed modifications to the home include a new master bath, extension of the entryway, enclosed breezeway between the home and the garage, as well as adding solar panels and a replacement of exterior siding, windows, doors, and other features. It is unfortunate that this home has lacked repair and maintenance work over the past few years, so there are several areas in need of fixing or replacement. Examples of these areas are on your plan sheet A1.0. The proposed alterations are, in part, for safety, for updating code compliance, future accessibility, energy efficiency, additional interior space, privacy, and noise minimization. For example, the entryway will be extended and the stairs will be removed to the front door to create a better accessible area in the future, as it will be all one level. The breezeway enclosure will create additional living area along with providing privacy and noise reduction, since the adjacent property to the north is a vacation rental and not all users are mindful of their activities and noise levels. There are certainly other items on the list, however, I believe it would be redundant for me to describe them all. The architects have done an outstanding job with the plans, as they have provided a comparison of the original and the proposed plans so that the Commission can clearly see the modifications. As a side note, I must say that it has been a bit of an undertaking trying to determine exactly what was the original and what changes and features have been added or removed over time, as Jim did not leave his home in the static state. We have discovered through the historical evaluation and help from the Mall family that there were several changes from the original construction up until a few years ago. In any case, a great deal of effort has been made by the Coughlins to propose a project that will maintain and celebrate the architecture and spirit of this Jim Mall home. In conclusion, we believe that the proposed project will certainly enhance the living space with a one-level redesign for the family and friends with disabilities, as well as their own aging with this house. It will reintroduce specific components that Jim had designed. It will maintain a simple massing of the home, provide a needed repair and maintenance, comply with setbacks, and more. So on behalf of the Coughlins, we certainly hope the Commission will support this project as presented tonight. This concludes my presentation. I also have the architects with me here this evening if you have any technical questions. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you, Kathy. Would anybody else like to speak to this? Please come forward, if you will. Okay. Seeing none, we'll open up for questions. We'll keep public comment open. Do we have any questions for the applicant? Susan?
No questions, just I'm real excited about this project and about the energy and enthusiasm that the owners have for restoring the building, for bringing in more environmentally appropriate practices and features. Having walked through the place and seen the site, the proposed, there aren't really changes, sort of adjustments really made sense in terms of modern living, in terms of climate change, all sorts of, and then just the deterioration of the, for example, the cedar siding, the shingles that you can see if you go, or curling. And so I love seeing new owners come in who really are invested in the style and preservation of little bits of Morro Bay history. So okay. I'm excited about it.
Michael, do you have any questions?
No, I guess we're just doing questions now.
Yeah, let's just do questions on the...
not yet. No.
Back to the applicant and Joseph? Okay. I've got a couple questions, and I'm... So, Kathy, maybe you and the architect might step forward, if you would. And so...
I'll let Bill introduce himself.
Okay. Could you please state your name?
Good evening, Commission. My name is Bill Eisman. I'm the architect on the project.
Okay, thank you. On the plans there were materials in quotations, such as cedar quotation siding, Are you going to be using true cedar siding as a replacement for the shingles, or are you using as a cement-based cedar look-alike board, or what are your thoughts on the basic materials that you're going to be using to replicate the skin?
Sure. The design intent is to use true cedar.
Okay.
Yes, we're not using a composite material there.
Okay, and the trellis work and stuff is going to be, solid wood or?
Correct. I actually believe the frame is a steel frame, and then we have wood infill
Okay.
for the trellis elements.
Okay, and then on the solar panels, I saw that you had them on a horizontal orientation. Have you considered the dust accumulation and the degradation of the horizontal orientation to the PV production?
I think that certainly is a consideration. I mean, it is known that there's some maintenance with photovoltaics, in general, that to keep them at their optimum use, or that you have to clean them from time to time. And so if that's what you're
Right.
asking, that is known by the applicant, by the
Okay.
owner.
We'll discuss one of the things that, could be possible is either put them on the east facing or the west facing,
They've done some preliminary calculations, and according to their calculations, it looks like they're going to wind up with about 10 kW in reality with this project, with the panels.
Yeah, that's a goodly amount, yeah. Then what are your, you and your clients' thoughts on the access, the beach access that's dedicated as an easement to the south side of the property?
There's really nothing on this property that indicates that there's an easement. It's actually, on the record of survey, it says alley. So we're going to do a little bit more research, but as far as they're concerned, it's not part of their property, and it doesn't look like it's right of way. So I'm not entirely certain. Probably was done just because of the paper street behind there, and trying to, at one time, maybe creating an alley if there ever was going to be a vehicular driving through that area. So,
And according to the track map, was there any maintenance agreement put together in the original track map? Or
Not that we've
you
seen, no.
found? Okay.
It's always been a question. At this point in time, I think we think it's the city's responsibility for maintaining it.
Okay. Do you have any record, just a second, do you have any record have you talked to the Coastal Commission about that, or has there been any discussion with them?
No, because this would predate the Coastal Commission.
Yeah.
So there wouldn't be anything that they would be aware of or have in their records.
Okay.
Because Jim All built this house in 71, so that predated the Coastal Commission, so there hasn't been anything since that time that would require going to the Coastal Commission for a permit.
Okay, great. And Michael?
Yeah, I guess the one question I had is I'm certainly happy to see the novel use of new materials, and the thing I was most interested in was the gabion stone, because if you've got about a 5-foot high section of that, if it's coming in a cage, the nature of the cage isn't described. So, the way we typically see those things is the galvanized material sort of degrades a bit, and you almost get rust like you see in some of the cloisters, reclamation areas. What is the nature of the caging around this that's facing the neighbor? And then I imagine you have to have a pretty big foundation underneath that if you're putting 5 feet of stone that's probably about 16, 12, 18 inches thick next to the fireplace on both sides. I was just wondering, it's not clear exactly what your detailing on there is, because you've been very good at, I think, about talking about the other details. That's the one that's really novel that people wouldn't have seen there before, that I would like to make sure for the record everybody is very aware of what your intent is there.
Sure, Commissioner Lucas, appreciate the comment. We haven't got into the construction
Okay.
details, but I have had experience with similar gabion walls, and in fact, you are correct, we have to have a footing to support that weight. The intent is there's actually a design inspiration image, if you will, in the packet that you have. I don't have page numbers here, but it's, thanks, page A90 at the top there, you can see that was a image that was, gives you a pretty good picture of what the intent is there.
Yeah, so it's a heavier gauge galvanized cage that's meant to be intact to frame the thing correctly.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
That's all I've got. Thanks.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation here. Okay, at this point, I'll close public comment and bring it back to the commission. And Joseph, you want to go ahead and get started on it?
Oh, sure. Excuse me. Let's see. First of all, I think this underscores the need to have a more robust city ordinance with respect to historical structures, because, frankly, not all the applicants are as responsible as this applicant appears to be. So, I know one's in the works. I look forward to seeing it. I'd also like to compliment them on, in this application, the renderings, which I found better than the usual course. And I'm particularly sensitive to that because I have difficulty translating often what the rendering would look like in reality, and I had a better sense of it from this. Again, as a layman with respect to architecture, I did give some thought to, changing the siding from shingles and changing the roof. But yeah, I have to conclude that I don't think that's essential to the integrity of the design. So I'm pleased with what I see.
Okay. Michael?
Yeah, I like a lot of Mr. Mull's work. I'm in a house from that era, and even though 1970 to my 64-year-old ears sounds new, it's 50 years old. So everything's falling apart. I know my house had single pane glass with wood stops, so the idea of wind coming off the coast would be brutal. So things need fixed. I thought this was an incredibly sensitive proposal. I liked everything that they were taking out, including the trellis work at the driveway. I liked what they were putting back in. I liked the materials. Some things I think are just problematic to meet the energy codes. I don't know the level of reflectance. I'd hate to see us start to get houses on the beach that end up being reflective glass. But my sense is that there's other technical ways to make that not happen. I like that they're coming in with the solar array, and I like the idea of a courtyard kind of house that looks in on itself in this kind of situation, as well as to the beach. And so I thought it was very sensitive, very carefully edited, and very nice set of materials palette.
Susan, do you have anything else to add?
Oh, you kind of heard my comments already.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, I'll follow suit on what the other commissioners have said. The one thing there's a couple things I'm still concerned about is I'm still concerned about that access, and, how we can, not burden the homeowner with it, but still keep it available for future access at some point, whether it's.
Can it be if it's got snowy plovers right on the other side?
I don't actually know that it's available to the public, period.
Okay.
I don't know that it was offered in the map, and it certainly wasn't accepted. And given the age of the subdivision, that offer would have expired anyway. So, there's all kinds of issues with that don't have anything to do with the house that's in front of you, because it's not on their property.
Right. Well, it's kind of an issue where, it's become a dumping ground, right now, and I think that's we don't have another chance to approach that, even if we get the neighboring property to it. Where's the nexus to try to remedy that situation, or do we have one?
Use of it for storage of things and that type of thing, we'd have to go back and research more into the subdivision to see whose rights belong to that area. Again, it might belong to the overall subdivision. I'm not sure exactly what the wording is on it, but I don't think that was offered to the public. But if it was, it would have expired because it wasn't accepted.
Okay.
If you're concerned about a nuisance issue, that can be dealt with through code enforcement.
Okay. Well, that's kind of what I'm seeing right now. Is it's become a dumping ground for yard clippings, and there were some various and sundry metal items there, and just a few things. So I think it just needs to either be maintained or maybe rededicated back to the homeowners on either side if it's not to be used.
I actually think that's something that the homeowner's looking into. I think that's what Ms. Novak was referring to when she was standing at the podium. Was some of this information came out through this process, and I believe that's something that they're looking into.
Okay. So I don't know I don't think we have a way to deal with that in this.
I don't have a good mechanism for you.
Okay.
Just because it's not on the subject property.
Okay, great. Well, that was my biggest issue with it. I think once again, I think it's they've done quite a bit of homework. I'm familiar with Jim Mall's work, and I'm familiar with Jim, and I think he would be using new materials in the same vein. From what my interaction with him, in the same format. So I don't have a problem with the stuff. But once again, it's true. The critical outcome is going to be how the materials are handled, and whether they're handled true to the material, or instead of just being a pastiche. And I think you're on the right track with what you're doing, and I hope you have the follow through for that. So I appreciate it. Okay, anybody else wish to? Do we have a motion then?
I move we approve Resolution PC 1919, Coastal Development Permit CPO 19-018 for exterior upgrades and 4 small additions to an existing home located at 33009 Beachcomber within the Coastal Commission Appeal jurisdiction.
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion? I just have one. I guess I've got one more question. Do we have? They're bound by the night sky or dark sky ordinance on this, so that we can assume they're not going to be putting spotlights out into the, to observe the snowy plovers there.
Yes, we have limitations for glare off-site and those types of things in our code as well. So.
Okay, good. So we don't have to put that in as a
correct.
amendment.
They're required to comply with the municipal code.
Okay, great. Okay. Any other discussion on the motion? Okay. Call the vote, please.
Commissioner Lucas?
Aye.
Commissioner Stewart?
Aye.
Commissioner Ingraffia?
Aye.
Chair Lohr?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, guys. Good luck on your project.
We expect an open house.
Okay, next on the agenda, we have item number B2. This is a continuance of the CUP 18-06, CDP 18-008, and PKG 18-01, and the location is 1130 Scott Street. Do we have any ex parte communication on this one? Okay. Ready with the staff report?
Yes. Okay, this is a continuation of a public hearing from June 4th to talk about this project at 1130 Scott Street. It is across the street from Carla's Kitchen. It's a small lot, 40 by 56, 2,240 square feet. It's undeveloped other than old site improvements, deck, Hollywood driveway to Scott Street. The zoning is C2, PD, SP. It is commercial, intended for heavier types of commercial and semi-industrial uses, not dependent on pedestrian traffic, and specifically zoned to not be near residential districts because of the adverse impacts of heavy commercial uses. Residential is allowed only as one security unit. Plan development allows for modification of development standards if such action results in a better design or other public benefit, provided that the specific design criteria of the general plan or land use plan applicable to the property is not exceeded. The Beach Street area specific plan provides for consideration of outdoor storage, offensive odors, light, glare, etc., generally conditions resulting from a heavier commercial use. Beach Street specific plan area also allows Planning Commission to approve parking in lieu fees if parking cannot be provided on the site. The land use designation is service commercial, specifically stating that the intent is to reserve space for service commercial businesses that are not compatible in residential neighborhoods. This is a summary of the plan that you reviewed June 4th, 2019. Had interior space of 3,497 square feet. 26% of that was commercial, 74% of that was residential. It provided one garage residential space and one open tandem residential space and two open commercial spaces. And this elevation shows you the heights, since that is one of the comments that the commission had in June. The comments that the commission provided with the applicant for redesign consideration was commercial portion needs to be the primary use and needs to look like a commercial business from the street. To address that, the applicant revised the project to be 51% commercial. They added prominent conceptual signage to the front and to the side. Parking was reduced to allow the commercial space along the street frontage. So there's the section on the bottom right is commercial popping out to the back of the sidewalk that previously was a parking space. And they added glass roll-up doors to the new pop-out portion of the commercial and retained them on the original frontage of the building. Commission also suggested that the residential portion should be reduced in size and be clearly secondary to the commercial use. This shows you, if you have very good eyesight, a June 4th plan. This is kind of a cut of the building, and below that, the revised plan. So the third floor residential was eliminated. So residential is now a 1,282 square foot, one bedroom unit on the second floor with a 56 square foot access stairway. Residential is 49% of the total project, and residential parking was reduced to one open space, no garage space. Commission also thought it would be helpful if the applicant could identify a potential business for the commercial space. The applicant does not currently have any active businesses, but it has a few ideas. I think previously discussed was hot rod refinishing. It would be kind of the finish detail touches, not really heavy automotive improvement. And they also have an idea for a mountain bike touring company. So the conditions of approval that are included in this resolution include a restrictive covenant that requires an active license business to operate on the ground floor in order for the residential unit to be allowed in the zone. The commission also suggested that the commercial portion of the building needs an increased clear height to be more prominent. And this shows you that the previous design, the commercial area was 10 feet from floor to ceiling. Now it's 12. Residential was previously, I think, 13, and now it's 11 and a half. And one section is 14, and there is still a rooftop deck. So the revised project overview, this is the new West Street frontage elevation. The ground level is 1,406 square foot commercial and 56 square feet residential stairway. The second floor is 1,282 square feet residential, 220 square foot deck, and the roof is a 646 square foot deck. Some floor plans, same configuration. This shows you one standard parking space, one van accessible, and in the bottom left of the image, it shows you where the commercial has popped out and is right along the street frontage. The ground floor is entirely commercial other than the 56 square foot area to get access to the residential unit on the second floor. Second floor is a one-bedroom residential unit with a deck. And the rooftop is a rooftop deck and stairways leading up to that. The development standards for C2 are met or exceeded by this proposal. There is a parking exception required and a request for in lieu fees. As I mentioned before, they're providing one open residential parking space and one van accessible space and access aisle. And this is in the parking management district. So the parking exception can be granted if the exception will not constitute a grant of special privilege, and if it will not adversely affect the health, safety, or welfare of persons working or residing in the vicinity, and no traffic safety problems will result from the proposed modification of parking standards. And finally, the exception is reasonably necessary for the applicant's full enjoyment of uses like those upon adjoining real property. And the staff recommendation is for approval of conditional use permit, hope this number is right, CUP 18-06, coastal development permit, CDP 18-008, and parking exception PKG 18-01 pursuant to the findings and conditions of approval included in the Planning Commission Resolution 20-19.
Okay. Any questions for staff? Joseph? Okay, seeing none. We'll open this up for, at this time, for public comment. Would the applicant or their agent please like to step forward? Please state your name and
Good evening, Commissioners. Emily Baranek, Jade Architecture, agent for the owner, Travis Kinney.
excuse me, could you pull the microphone closer?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Emily Baranek, Jade Architecture, agent for the owner. Travis Kinney and our design team's also here again this evening to answer any questions you might have. We appreciate you having us back this evening with the redesign. We're also appreciative of the opportunity to come before you in June and present the project. We heard your concerns and noted your recommendations. We've worked with the owner since then to modify the project and feel like we've achieved something that he's still very proud of in terms of it being a high-quality project, as well as now meet your needs and the city's requirements. Much of this was already covered, but what I would like to do is highlight some of the specific changes that we made since we did get into a lot of detail about the design last time. I just kind of wanted to put up some of the images side by side so that you can see the efforts that we made to...
Okay.
I do have printouts. I could just... It's going to be interesting. Okay. Oh, okay. Well, much of this was already covered, so I can just reiterate that having heard your concern for the commercial space being primary and the ratio of commercial space to residential space in that regard. We were able to reduce the residential square footage by, I think it was nearly 40%, increase the commercial square footage by over 50%, so that it is as close to 1-to-1 as possible, which was the ratio of the project approved in 2006. We, as well, reduce the area of total decking by nearly 25%. And in doing so, we're able to maintain the industrial modern design that everybody seemed to like, that I know Travis is really fond of. And as well, we're able to highlight the commercial use, we believe, from the street as requested, with the increase in the first floor commercial space ceiling height, the reduction in the prominence of the residential square footage when viewed from the street, and the addition of the multiple signage options. No, still not going to work. That's all right. So as revised, the project does now require 3 commercial parking spaces, including 1 ADA and 2 residential spaces, for a total of 5. Unfortunately, with the small site and the increased commercial square footage on the first floor or ground level, we weren't able to provide that. So what we are providing is 1 dedicated residential space and a second space, commercial, ADA accessible, for potential use by the residential unit during non-business hours, similar to like a mixed-use arrangement that's popular and, you know, been proven to be pretty successful. The owner, I think, still feels that it's premature to commit to a specific business use, but with the requirement of a covenant per condition of approval number 7, we feel like that requirement is met. And of course, he will still work with staff to determine if and when a business is decided upon, whether it does meet the requirements of the zone and is appropriate for the approved project, and if not, we'll of course make sure it meets any additional use requirements. Travis is also comfortable with all the other conditions of approval and really appreciates staff support this round. We're, again, proud of the design. We feel like we put a fair amount of time and energy into making sure that it was something that everybody would still be happy with and that would work for Travis. What a bummer. We hope the Commission agrees that we've met all the requirements and still provided a high-quality design for the city. If you have any questions, we're here to answer them.
Okay. Well, great. Thank you very much. Sorry about the technology. And so does anybody else wish to speak to this item? Please come forward, state your name.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Gordon Fox. I'm a property owner here in town. I happen to own a lot that's very close to this project. It's an undeveloped lot at this time, and I've been thinking for quite some period of time about what I might be able to do with it. Somewhat familiar with the process of going through what Trevor's gone through. Had a discussion with him not long ago about the process and the work he's put in and the expense and that type of thing. And I'm very pleased to see that we have some conditionally approved project that's going to be taking place on Scott Street. I'm familiar with the specialized zoning area that we have in this area, and I hope you guys are also, because it's fit in between a bunch of other types of zones. It's a small zone, and there are so many pre-existing places that do not conform to the zoning as we have now, that it's very difficult to tell what is appropriate, what isn't appropriate, what the good parking is on Scott Street, because there's times when Carla's is busy and people park on the street, and then there's times when it's not busy at all. So it's a bit of a confused area. I'm very happy to see something being able to be done, and so I'm here tonight to support this project.
Okay, thank you very much. Next, please.
I apologize for my appearance. I just came straight from a job site. I'm Sean Green. I'm a lot owner on Scott Street. This is a planned development area, and part of the conditions for planned development is to offer public benefit. Any development whatsoever, any investment on Scott Street is providing public benefit. It's one of the worst streets in the entire city. And part of the reason is that it's so difficult to get a project through on Scott Street. Add that to the fact that the city of Morro Bay has really hurt the Beach Street district over the last several years, including abandoning the Beach Street undergrounding district over the last year, abandoning the sidewalk completion on Surf Street, abandoning the Surf Street stairs, letting the trash kind of accumulate and city equipment accumulate down at the bottom of the Surf Street stairs. Those are just some off the top of my head, and for this project to get to this point, I think it's a great thing. I'd love to see the kind of enthusiasm from the commissioners as we saw with the previous project. I do believe, and maybe the last public commenter is an indication of that there's money ready to invest in this area if given the platform to do so. And so I applaud this project, and I definitely support it as a hopeful future developer on Scott Street, regardless of what type of commercial business goes in there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Would anybody else like to speak? Good evening.
My name is Frank Scognamillo. My wife and I own the property adjacent to this site at 1126 Scott Street. And we also would like to reiterate our approval and encouragement that the Commission allow this project to move forward because Scott Street needs it. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much. Anybody else? Okay, seeing none, we'll go for questions to the applicant from the commission. Susan, do you have any questions? Michael? Joseph?
Yeah, I have one question for the applicant. Even a casual examination of the street you realize that from time to time parking can be pretty tight. So it seems in working out the design, there were in order to increase the commercial space, there were two possibilities: either to locate the additional commercial space on the first level, or put the additional commercial space as an office on the second floor. And I'm just curious as to how about the decision making. What was it that made you decide that you wanted to put the commercial space on the first level and sacrifice one of the parking spaces?
Honestly, I think it was mostly the prohibitive cost of locating publicly accessible commercial space on a second or third floor. The requirements for that being, at minimum, a basic elevator, but I believe most likely a commercial grade elevator, which is both very large but also very expensive. It really would have been financially prohibitive. And it would have taken up quite a bit of space, such that the resultant project would have been even more difficult to massage square footages for.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else? Nope.
It's okay.
I think we're good then.
Okay, thank
on
you.
that. Thanks for your presentation, and thanks for all the comments. We'll bring it back to the commission. Who would like to start on this?
I just wanted to ask a question of staff for clarification. So the requirement for parking would be 3 commercial and 2 residential, and within that 1 ADA?
So the commercial use isn't identified, so we're kind of generalizing with the commercial, but that's correct. So it would be 5 total, they're providing 2, there'd be 3 in lieu.
And why would you require 2 on the residential side in a 1-bedroom caretaker unit?
Because it's
Is that just
single-family-
part of our
yes.
code? Okay. And then down the road, when somebody does apply for a business license, does the planning department review what that business is and what their potential parking needs might be and say, gee, this building doesn't really look like it would suit you because, it can't sustain 10 parking spaces, say, or is that part of that process down the road?
Yes.
Okay.
And as long as I have the floor. The parking, I wanted to add or have you consider adding a condition. I didn't specifically call out the language for the parking in lieu. So what I would suggest is Planning Commission 11 be added. That is parking in lieu fees. And the wording would be something to the effect of applicant will be able to pay parking in lieu fees for required parking in excess of what is provided. And the wording that I chose is specifically, since we don't know what the commercial use is, that they can pay parking in lieu once that's identified.
So you're suggesting they wouldn't have to pay that up front until they identify what that use is going to be?
I think the timing's going to have to be pretty close. I don't know if there's any specific condition, but before the residential can be occupied, there has to be an identified commercial use. So it could be on issuance of building permit.
Okay. That seems really fair because it gives them a chance to get their project going without excessive fees up front. That's one thing we were talking about, I know, in fee structures, is that perhaps you phase them in down the road so that you don't have these massive fees up front while you're trying to pull together your construction budget. So I think that would be a good condition in my mind.
We would probably want the condition to be prior to final. Yeah, not issuance of the building permit.
Okay, Michael?
No, I just want to say I really appreciate the efforts. Two of my favorite places are Amsterdam and London. And, the tiny, dense, muse-like situations that you see there are kind of unlike we're used to seeing in the United States. And it's this kind of, beautiful small project that has live work or multiple small businesses, incubator for a new startup or something like that, that's not burdened by the residential or a different kind of commercial around the periphery. I think this is a really wonderful thing to have come in there, and I think it's a good place to look at seeding some of these ideas. This is a unique area, differently positioned than Quintana, which could support things like different things like this. And I think this is a really good example of a project that's gone through a lot of reviews and gotten better. So I'm pretty happy with what I see. I think it's curious, but I also think it's interesting that there's two small commercials there. On one hand, I want to say, oh, it's easier if they're rented as one, but then maybe it is a small kind of more open-ended kind of thing. And I don't know who ends up going in here, if it's a detailer or we just came back from a trip to Sedona, and there's this pink Jeep group that takes people through the mountains on Jeeps and things. I don't know. There's all sorts of great things I could think of that work with the community with a small scale that I think it's a great idea. I'm happy to see proceed.
Joseph?
Yeah, I likewise admire the design, and I think it'll be a really significant added benefit to that street and that neighborhood. But there are a couple of other things. Just to make clear, though, this business of 51% commercial, 49% residential is somehow determining that the residential is secondary. I don't think that's conclusive at all, and I would hope that we wouldn't be bound by that if projects like this come before us, because I think clearly what it's about is that there isn't anything that's really economically feasible that you can do with that space on the second floor. So certainly, in this case, why not make it residential? But there might be situations where a 51-49 split would be totally inappropriate, unnecessary, and really just sort of disguising that the intent was to build residential and commercial area. And then the other thing is, and that's sort of together what we were talking about, finding the appropriate tenant, is to make sure that these things do not become sort of, for lack of a better word, hobby commercials, where, somebody is a collector or a remodeler by hobby and isn't really bothered with making it commercially viable. It just becomes a place to store his collection. So we have to make sure that that doesn't happen because, frankly, commercial property is too valuable and too rare in the city.
Mm-hmm. So, Nancy, I got a question. Can we do in lieu fees in this zone for the residential parking side?
I don't think it specifies that you can't.
Okay. This is the first time I've seen that application on it, so just wanted to be sure to bring that up. And once again, I want to give my approval for the project in concept. I think it's, and I could see it being, because of the views from there and being in the location, this could be a great, incubator or startup, generator, have, preferably something higher, maybe higher tech come in to, that appreciates the ambiance there and being able to look out at the bay and not have a metal recycler there or something like that, because it is limited on the size of the commercial because it's only a 2,500 square foot lot. So, and then you try to put parking on that, and and so I think it was handled correctly on this. And we've also, in previous projects through, before, I don't know if it's stated, but it's been close. So we've had a limitation on residential, ultimate sizes. I think it was either 1,200 square feet or 1,800 square feet that we've had limitations for secondary residential usage. So if it was a bigger lot and you had, 5,000 square feet of commercial, you couldn't put a 5,000 square foot, residence there. So I think we've dealt with that in that to make it purely secondary. The other thing that I'd kind of like to bring up to the commission to see what you guys' thoughts are on it is, once again, the dark sky lighting. I'm sure that's going to be in the, in the building approval for their lighting schematics. And then also on the signage, I'd just like, because we're not quite through with our sign ordinance, I'd like to make sure that we have, what would destroy this building to me, it'd be an internally lit sign, blaring out, for, as an eyesore. So I'd like to, restrict signage to externally lit. And then once again, as far as a roof deck, we've typically required that any items on the roof deck be below the height of the parapet or the building maximum height, so that we don't have, umbrellas sitting up there during some of our high wind events and landing somewhere else in town. So I'd like to see about adding a condition for that.
So are you talking about permanent or umbrellas?
It's, permanent, to have somebody put a tiki bar up there, that's above the height of the parapet, that's permanent or semi-permanent. Either way, it'd be hard to determine if it's not nailed down whether it's permanent or not. So I think, items for storage or use, when not in use, should not be above the height of the parapet.
What about plants?
Plants, I don't think that's a problem. I think vegetation would be okay. But yeah, it's.
I'm sorry.
Okay,
No,
well, let's talk about it.
Yeah, I thought our strategy for all of our tops of the buildings is nothing goes above there. It's one thing to put up an umbrella for an hour or two, but you have to take down the umbrella. But I wouldn't want to see palms or anything else up there because it starts to violate the purpose of the roof of the building height, which is to help provide views across the city. So if we start allowing, larger and larger technological conveniences up there, I'd like to not see, antennas or anything above that line. I think it's really offensive to see the way people creep above the height restrictions.
Okay, Joseph, how do you feel about that?
Without question, I'm in agreement. I mean, that issue came up with respect to, well, I think it was we were looking at Main Street for future development and the whole idea of superstructures up there. No, I'm only what's essential because, as you say, given the opportunity, someone will misuse it. Yeah.
Yep. Susan?
I guess it's not something I really thought about. The idea of plants on the rooftop, I love, if you're going to use that as a space. But obviously a palm tree on that's kind of silly, but you have some ivy, falling over the side of the parapet. It could be beautiful. So, okay, is that okay? Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, we'll open up public comment.
Just to clarify, one item for the client, that would include as well then solar being a permanent structure would not be...
By state law, we're not allowed to restrict solar. So by solar access, the solar access code.
Well, the structure of the solar array itself, would it be restricted by the building height maximum?
We're not allowed... We're not allowed as far as I understand, as long as it, I think there's a 2 foot zone above maximum height that it can go in, such as chimneys and stuff. And then help me out with this on this, Scott.
I'd have to go back and review what the requirements are related to solar. There's limitations that you can place on it, and they can't be related to aesthetics.
Okay. So where I see you've got the rooftop section over there, I could see you do a 5% or a 10% slope on solar mounting, and I don't think that would be a problem at all.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Because we're not trying to restrict solar. I think we're trying to restrict palm trees here, from what I get. Flying palms, anyways. Okay, so do we need to put some wording, Nancy? Do we have a...
So I think we have 3 changes and or additions. One is just to add to the signage condition number 10 that it can only be externally lit.
Yes.
We have the parking in lieu fees, which is applicant will be able to pay parking in lieu fees for the required parking in excess of what is provided, payable, or a payment plan in place prior to final C of O. And 3, roof deck, restrict roof deck furniture for non-semi-permanent, I'm open to better wording, furniture above deck railing.
Yeah.
For maybe furniture or items.
Items.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, you guys happy with those conditions? Okay, do we have a motion?
Go for it, Joe.
So I move that we adopt Resolution PC 20-19 for the approval of conditional use permit CPU 18-06, coastal development permits CDP 18-008, and the parking exception PG parking 18-01 for the proposed construction project at 1130 Scott Street, with the additional provisions of parking in fee lieu due after the
does he have to read the whole thing?
Just say as.
Parking, all right. As discussed, the in lieu, as discussed when the in lieu parking fees will be due. And the second amendment with respect to lighting schematics to avoid to only have externally lit signage. and the third amendment requiring no items or structures above parapet height?
Yes. Or maximum building height, if they're, I think they're pretty close to it, but, yeah. Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion on the motion in the second? Okay, I think we can call the question then.
Commissioner Lucas?
Aye.
Commissioner Stewart?
Aye.
Commissioner Graffia?
Aye.
Chair Lohr? Yes. All
you.
right. Thank you very much, and good luck with your project. Okay, so we have item C is new business. We have none. Unfinished business, we have none. So at this point, we have planning commissioner comments and future agenda items. Does anybody have any comments? Or
I'm just thinking about the answer to my question. So it's not possible to do commercial development on a second floor without making accessible elevators or extensive ramps and all that?
with ADA requirements.
Yeah, you have to have an elevator.
There's a
Or a
limited.
ramp of some type.
Yeah, it'll be the city of Babylon from.
I think there's a restriction where if you have less than a certain amount of square foot and you call it a mezzanine, I think it might even be like 250 feet or something.
There are
like
some
that.
limitations, you're correct.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Or so there are some caveats to that.
Yeah, but a commercial elevator is a couple $100,000.
Yeah, no, I know. It seems like, again, it's one of these laws of unintended consequences,
Right.
where if you wanted to have a small commercial space, you can't because you can't afford the elevator, even though, you may not have much need for that elevator. Yeah.
I think you hit the nail on the head with the unintended consequences when you have sort of small projects.
Yeah, and then also too is renting, the rental market for second story commercial space is extremely limited, and so it's just not viable.
Yeah, earlier I was thinking this would be like an interesting. You could operate as whatever business could have an office upstairs. From there, operate this see where you can't say customers never come to your office.
Yep. Okay. So then, future agenda items, Scott. Where are we in some favored projects like the commercial design guidelines, and
I think I mentioned this before. I mean, at this point, I don't have capacity to take on. We have to get done with the general plan, LCP,
Right.
zoning code update. We did get comments back from Coastal.
Okay. Good.
On the implementation plan, which is the zoning code, on Friday. I haven't had a chance to look at them, but that was a really quick turnaround. Again, I sent them copies of the zoning code again a couple of weeks ago, and they were able to turn it around in a couple of weeks.
Oh.
But they had them originally since October. But I mean, the whole issue with that is, the state released a bunch of grant funding to the Coastal Commission and then didn't provide them money specifically to hire staff to address all of the cities that are doing LCP updates. So they're a little bit of a, catch-22 for them. And so while it's frustrating, I understand where they sit because they didn't have to do it. Going back to what you were asking, our RFP for the housing element closes tomorrow. And so we'll be starting the housing element, and we have to adopt the new building code. And I'm starting discussions with folks about that in 2 weeks, because we have our local amendments that we have to work through, and so I have to sit down with fire and building. And so until I get that stuff, sort of wrapped, there's not a whole lot of capacity to do other stuff. So in the interim, we'll be left sort of utilizing the design guidelines for commercial that we have in place that we can use, and those are the ones that are, like in the downtown and the waterfront areas, or in our downtown and waterfront strategic plan. At least there is some things in there that you can use as tools when development's happening in those areas, to start the discussion and to provide guidance when applicants come forward to us, meaning staff, We direct them to look at those things to make sure that their projects are consistent with them, because we tell them we will be reviewing your application for consistency with those policies and bringing those forward as we come in front of the Planning Commission. So we do point those types of things out. But in the near term, I just don't have staff to carry this out. And, we might have a bit of additional burden on the GPLCP because we may be taking over management of that project internally. So.
Okay. And when do you think that we might see the corrected version or the?
Yep. So good question. I am the comment that I just made. There's many moving parts to that, and I'm probably a few weeks away from, bringing a solution to that. There's some reasons for it, but I don't want to talk about it here.
Okay. Okay. Any other?
I just had one comment. One of the things that at the conference they were talking about was the hardening of cities based on the wildfire issues. And one of the things I remember very specifically that one of the citizens talked about on Scott Street was the lack of undergrounding. The initiatives on undergrounding seem to have fallen apart. And that seems to be one of the key things about the fires that have been so massive. And I was just wondering, as we look at the general plan, should we be looking as we review those documents at issues like that have maybe changed over the last 2 years? Should we be rethinking how we attack things like undergrounding utilities, which we've been pretty lax at forcing a number of times because of costs?
Yeah, I mean, that's probably, if we want to go into that discussion, it would be probably worth, pulling Public Works into it to go over some of the past history and why the city's done what it's done and hasn't done. I don't have, I've been here for 5 years, but we've had limited conversations internally about it. And so I know Rob Lavick, the Public Works Director, has a better handle on, why we're at where we're at today. And if we wanted to have that, we have to look at what the ramifications of that are. I mean, we don't have significant, we only have one, what's the designation? Wildlife urban interface area adjacent to the city. And that's on the south side of the South Bay Boulevard. So it really, we don't have a whole lot of those, areas that are subject to extreme fire danger. Even those areas that back up to the undeveloped land to the east, what you're mostly dealing with is grasslands out there. Those aren't really considered, dangerous, areas because you don't get tall flames that come off of those normally. And then they graze a lot of them, and so it's even less of an issue. So I've had lots of conversations with our fire department about that, and they don't consider them, severe fire danger areas, and they're not mapped that way by the state. So I think if you're looking at undergrounding, that has to be an initiative the city's willing to go down. And then usually what you end up with, if you really want to do it, is you form a district. Well, if you form a district, then the folks in that district have to agree to be in it. And that's one of the problems, right? I've gone through that process in the past, at least doing the front end, and I've mentioned this to this commission in the past. Did this, when I worked for the city of Pismo Beach. We had folks in Pismo Heights area, approach the city council about undergrounding, and then so the council. There was a lot of folks in the audience that spoke to it and continued to keep coming back to council and speaking to it. And finally, the council said, okay, well, we'll allocate some funds to go do an undergrounding study. And they went and did an undergrounding study. And when it came out that it was going to cost $15,000 a lot, one person showed up to the council meeting after that. Council, needless to say, was unhappy because it wasn't like you had to pay the $15,000 up front. It could be just assessed against your property, and there was no interest at that point. So that's just an example of the issues you would face trying to go down the path of forming a district. And so then if you don't do that, then you have to come up with what's the one-off look like. And that's what we've done in the past, and the city's not been consistent with the undergrounding requirements because there's a lot of factors that go into it. And then if you're going to have situations where you can't underground, then you need to have some sort of in lieu fee that's in place. And so had conversations with the Public Works Department about doing that so we could accumulate money over time to underground larger stretches of utility lines in our neighborhoods. But that discussion hasn't gone much further than that. But that's how you do it. We actually did that when I was in Pismo. We sat down and said, okay, well, we have these requirements, and sometimes you can't underground, some of these lines, so let's do an in lieu fee program when we set one up. So that's probably where the city would need to go, is if we're going to have conditioning, requirements on projects, then you have to have the ability, if it can't actually be done, that you have in lieu fees that would allow you to, once you've accumulated some funds, to do longer stretches and those types of things. Because I know when we've had projects that were conditioned to do that, in many instances they weren't able to, because of where the poles were and those types of things. So it became a problem, and then we didn't have the in lieu fee in place. So we're kind of stuck.
The other way to look at it is, if I'm not mistaken, and during some of those discussions, people were talking about the autopsy on the various fires and things, and they were saying things like the people who were now going to try to get fire insurance were finding it had gone up, multiple times. That because things weren't undergrounded, now all of a sudden, when you're in certain locales, your fire insurance was tens of thousands of dollars, and
probably in those high hazard fire severity zones, or WUI areas, wildland urban interface areas, that are mapped like that. There are areas like that all over the county. You think North County in Paso and Atascadero, Templeton, and those areas. There are areas that are mapped in that high hazard severity zones. So we just don't have them around us. And so those things, those areas and those designations lead you to have higher fire insurance requirements. That's what they tie them to, among other things. So, but I think it's certainly, as we bring the document back, certainly worthwhile to have the conversation, and maybe that's, at a minimum, maybe we end up being able to at least put in lieu fees and those types of things, so we can collect the money, because the city we don't have any program in place right now. So anything's a step in that gets us more of that is a step in, I think, the right direction for many reasons, not just the fire issue, but aesthetics and everything else. Some of the poles we have in town are like spider webs. So
Yeah. So Scott, would we do this through the LCP process?
I think that if we gave direction through that about what we would do, and we could give direction about setting up when and where we want to do those, we can identify that through that process, and then I think on the back end of that, you have to set up sort of the in lieu fee program, so that we get money if it's infeasible, because sometimes it is.
Okay. And we would do that for individual zones.
I mean, we could do that in general. I think you want to say for new commercial development, they're underlining all the lines that come in. Yeah. The bigger issue is the larger power lines that we have. I mean, you can't underground anything that's 12 kV or above without authorization from PG&E. They don't want a bunch of drops running down poles, because if you run into it in a car, you might have problems. And so they don't like a lot of those scenarios out there. So they don't want a bunch of one-offs. They want you to take down full drops, and we don't get enough money from the state anymore, where it makes it real feasible for those types of things. But the other utilities, which is what you see on most of the poles, it's not the electrical lines that are the real issue. It's all of the cable, and it's the fiber and those types of things that are on the lines, the phone lines and those types of things that are what's clogging most of our above ground utility poles up.
I feel like, and Joseph, maybe you remember that we did address some of this during the GPAC process, or at least sort of a preference for it if it was feasible. I mean,
it sounds,
we weren't trying to be really, restrictive, but hey, if we're looking at a 20-year plan, this is something we'd like to see. I feel like it's in there somewhere.
And there's comments in there. I recall some of the comments about it. I don't recall the policy necessarily about it. It's not jumping to the forefront of my brain right now, although I'll admit I haven't looked at it comprehensively in a while because of what we've been doing, but just going over comments with Coastal Commission staff, and then we just got the zoning code stuff back. I was even talking to our senior planner, Cindy Jason, this morning, and it was like, the zoning code is going to be like a whole new document, because we sent it to Coastal in October of last year. I haven't really looked at it since then. I've had our planners look at it related to their projects and kind of evaluate them, but that's just looking at development standards for the most part. So we're going to have to become reacquainted with all of the policies in it again, because it's been so long, because we've kind of been sitting idle waiting. So
Thanks. The one other thing I was going to say is, or Ms. Novak's out here in the audience, a number of citizens have been meeting about a historical ordinance, and at some point that would be ready to give to the city for whatever tasking that happens with that. And obviously there would it would come up for hearings and things like that. But I think the idea was that the timing of that might be something that could be folded into the submission as well.
It could. It just depends on what the city council wants to do with that effort. And I so when the council went through the goal setting process, that was something that came up and was not put into the goals for the next year. So I don't know whether it was thought that effort was going to take longer, so they didn't do it, or there wasn't a lot of conversation about it in the open meetings. There was some, side conversations that happened on it, but they didn't incorporate it into the goal setting process. So because it hasn't been there, it hasn't been something that staff's engaged much with. I sort of followed it because I get all the emails, they send them to me, and kind of when I have time, look through them. But again, I have all these other things going on. So many initiatives. It's hard to keep track of all of it. It's something I'm interested in, so it would have been something I would have liked to have been able to engage in. I just there's so many hours in a day, and haven't been able to really jump in as like I would have liked to from the beginning. So. But it's nice that there's a citizens group out there that's willing to do that. I think that's fantastic, because how else are we going to get that? Because it wasn't something the city identified as a goal, but it is something that groups put together. They can go to council now, and say, hey, we've done this. Can we have a conversation about it? Would you, be willing to put this in your process now that we've done it? And I think that's the methodology for, and maybe it gets worked out through this commission. Maybe we have meetings on it to discuss, components of that, and we work through it that way. If council, gives authorization for us to do that, or direction for us to do that. So.
On the, I think it was the community aggregate for utilities.
Community Choice Aggregation, Monterey Bay Power Authority that we're combined with, yeah.
I tried to get one of the goals in that as funding for one of the benefits is funding for undergrounding, especially for here, and nobody else saw the value in it. So missed opportunities on that. Okay, was there anything else that you wanted to say?
Yeah, I did have the handout that I gave you for the fourth annual Citizens Planning Academy. That's put on by the Central Coast chapter of the American Planning Association. It's great if you want to learn about planning. I offered it up to the commission. If you're interested in going, I will foot the bill for you. It's not expensive. It's $40, and the sessions last from it's on Thursday evenings in San Luis at the RRM Design Group building on South Higuera. It runs from September 26th through November 21st. And everybody that I've talked to that's gone to it has found it valuable. Our Commissioner Stewart has attended it. But other than that, we've had, Erica Crawford, our chamber CEO, she attended it. Had many citizens in town attend it to learn more about planning. Susan can maybe speak more than myself. I have not attended it about the value there. But it is certainly something that's available out there. And it's, if anybody, out in on the TV side of things is interested, you can go to the Central Coast APA website at www.centralcoastapa.org, and the applications are online there. Again, it's one fee, $40 for all of those meetings, and they do provide some refreshments. It goes from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. on Thursday evenings. I think it's well worth it. You have a lot of local planning professionals that present sessions at it. A lot of key topics: affordable housing, greenhouse gas emissions. All those types of things will be speakers that'll be attending that and providing information to the public. So
I think it's really worth it. Real current stuff. They talk about transportation issues, bikeable communities, a lot of planners and experts, but also people actually on the ground in the field. Bringing their experience, the practical sort of common sense stuff to it, and opportunity for dialogue. And then, of course, the folks attending it were from all different communities and different parts of those communities. So whether they were on a commission or somebody like Erica, or just citizens, people who maybe were part of some nonprofit. So you could make those connections with other people and hear what's going on in other communities too. It was real valuable, I thought.
All right. Sounds like a great course. Is there anything else? Anybody else like to?
I really like the direction we went in this evening with a couple. I mean, we were fortunate. We had a couple of really great projects. I was really glad that the Scott Street project came back, and I think the more we can present ourselves as reasonable and positive about both commercial and residential development, the more we'll get, and we need it. We need it to sort of fill the coffers, but and not in a scary way. I think sometimes the public gets a little afraid of, oh my God, we're gonna, we can't overdevelop Morro Bay. It's not possible, but we do have a lot of kind of blighted, empty lots that could do these beautiful little developments that encourage commercial property development, and the kind of residential that a single person or a couple is going to love to live up above that place. So I was excited by both these projects, and I'm excited about the outcome that, hour and a half, and mostly we're just blathering right now. So it wasn't even like it was, a struggle. Yeah. And the comments, you guys who have this expertise more in engineering and architecture and design and building are always, really informative for me. So I like to hear all that. I'm pleased. I hope it sends a good message out there to potential developers that we're doing the good work here.
Well, we don't want to be the commission of no.
Exactly.
We want to try to make, that's my point of view. It's we're trying to make viable projects that are going to be a benefit for both the applicants and the community.
Yeah.
And that's where I see our roles being.
Yeah, it's great.
All right. At this point, unless somebody else has anything to say, we'll adjourn to the next regularly scheduled meeting on September 3rd at 6 p.m. at the Veterans Memorial Building. Scott, does it look like we have items for that meeting?
I believe we have 2 items, and I probably have a discussion item for you too about grant opportunities related to SB2 funding, probably related to housing. So I'll probably bring that forward too, assuming I have time to write the staff report.
Okay.
So yeah.
Great. At this point, we'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much.